me okay? Yes, perfect. So good to see you all. Actually, thank you very much for coming to see a talk about public goods in a very hot day in Berlin. My name is Ele. I'm the co-founder of the Radical project. And today, the title of my talk is Interdependence, On-Chain Graphs, and Public Goods. So, short story about me. Graph structures fascinated me. Actually, I've been, working within the network science space for now probably more than 15 years. I was previously at SoundCloud, the music company, dealing with a very different type of network. But yeah, over the years, I got super excited with graphs. And one of my favorite graphs is this one. This is coming from the Nix package manager. This is the runtime and build dependency graph of Nix. And I believe that for the engineers in the room, this image of this super dense, hyper-connected network is probably not surprising. But to me, I always thought that this is brilliant. And the reason I love this graph so much is that I believe that it really reveals a profound truth about our species, which is that we are all interdependent and our success hinges upon the success of others. And I really think that if you're building software, you see this in action every day. You're importing someone else's work, and especially if you're building open source software, effectively building on the many times free work of others. So when I started getting into Ethereum, this whole idea of the world computer was really attractive to me. Specifically, this idea of this one database, a transparent ledger, cryptographic identities, where we can actually reflect relationships and have accounts interact with other accounts and have accounts interact with programs, smart contracts, right? And obviously, many years after, and after so much usage for Ethereum, I think we can say this with confidence now. Ethereum is a graph, and I don't mean this in the technical term of a graph database, but I mean this in the math term of a graph structure, where effectively you have a number of entities, and then you have a number of relationships with them. On Ethereum, this usually manifests, of course, based on transactions, right? So you transact with another account, you transact with another smart contract. But I always thought about that as an amazing opportunity for builders to actually build something unique that really showcases this interdependence of software and this interdependence of our species. So many years later, I feel that we got the killer app, and the killer app until now has been surveillance, has been effectively on-chain analytics, right? And this saddens me because, again, we have this beautiful infrastructure. We have this piece of technology that actually has certain properties that allow us to build more interesting things based on this graph of relationships and entities and on this open data set. So what I want to talk about today is can we go beyond this on-chain analytics? Can we actually build something interesting based on this interdependence of basically of our species? So zooming into a few interesting projects over the years. So one of the first projects that actually tried to leverage this networked view, this interconnected view of our species was Circles UBI. This is a project that came out of Berlin. It was actually created here. And the main idea behind Circles UBI was actually to leverage this web of trust, right? A web of trust is an old concept where effectively, you have a human that is actually connected to a number of different humans, right? They form their own circle, and then they transact with their own circle. And what Circles did is basically took this idea that we find in software a lot around the web of trust and tried to apply this into money, into creating new money. And the way Circles did this is by inventing a very interesting mechanism where every user actually in that network will have its own personal token, and then effectively the network rewards you in simplified terms for connectedness by providing a UBI for you. This experiment has been live now for a few years and has, I think, a few hundreds of thousands of users. And it was one of the first attempts that I saw of someone actually saying, oh, look, we have this interconnected data set in this one single data store. Let's do something cool with it. Around 2021, another interesting project actually popped up in the scene, and this is Mirror, Mirror XYZ, which effectively is a publishing platform. And you can think of it as a decentralized alternative to Medium, but there's a lot more going on. And during the last bull market, one of the things that was actually happening at Mirror was that people were minting NFTs with the content that was part of those blog posts on Mirror, and then they were auctioning them. So at some point, the Mirror team decided to introduce this idea of splits. And this idea of splits is super simple. Effectively, you have a little splitter that, every time that there's an NFT auction, then some of those proceeds are actually routed into a bunch of different addresses. Nothing crazy, but I think super effective. And I think already at the time, there were a few splitter contracts on Ethereum, but very, hand-wavy, very okay, just one-off type of thing. So I think they were the first, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was the first team that actually took this idea and implemented this in a user experience, in a polished user experience. And the way it looked like was a bit like this, where effectively you have your NFT auction, and then you specify on-chain a number of addresses that will split 100% of those funds. And again, this is very simple, but I think, this flattened graph structure effectively, Mirror helped bring forward this idea that behind many of those projects, there are multiple individuals and multiple entities. So at the beginning of 2022, we launched the alpha version of my project, which is called Drips. And Drips effectively is a decentralized toolkit for funding public goods that really tries to harness this interconnectedness, interdependency between humans and software. And what we did was we were very inspired by the work that Mirror did. So we took this idea and we said, what if we actually abstract that? What if we actually don't need to tie that into an NFT auction, right? What if we can actually have a smart contract on Ethereum where you can go and specify the splits configurations? And within our product, we call those drip lists, which effectively is a collection of Ethereum addresses or ENS names. And we're doing some interesting things with Git repositories that I will touch on in a bit. But effectively, you have this nice package where you can package all of those things under one title. This is a list of someone actually calling that list my dependencies, and then specifying on-chain this configuration, which has a number of recipients and a number of percentages around them, right? And I think our contribution to this space was very much, going beyond this intentional, okay, there was an NFT auction, now proceeds will be routed, into something more abstract, which basically says that you don't need to have money flowing at that moment, but you can actually go and on-chain communicate this relationship you have with a number of other addresses. If you fund me, these things will be funded as well. That's one way to think about it. So that was the one primitive we put together. The other primitive we put together was this idea of streaming. This is basically by the second payments. This is something that by now is, I think, quite well understood within the Ethereum community. But our thinking was, again, that if we put together a splitting contract and a streaming contract, then you get these really powerful ways to align incentives between funders and recipients, and you have money flowing in that network, effectively. A few days later, another amazing project actually launched. This is 0x Splits. And what 0x Splits did, which is brilliant, is they took the splitting idea and then they made it even more composable. So they basically said that, within Drips, you have all of these different configurations, but it's just one smart contract that is actually holding all of those. But what 0x Splits did is basically took this and made every splits configuration its own smart contract, which effectively allows it to compose in a really, really nice way. And since then, they've been doing also very, very interesting things. So, okay, we have now these primitives. I showed you a few of the teams actually trying to play with this idea of this, network goods and network style of funding. But what does this mean for public goods? So in my opinion, a lot of this stuff are about establishing new norms, establishing new behaviors, and as a result, establishing new economics, because economics is a behavioral science at its core. So let's look at some practical examples of what builders have been doing with these primitives. The first thing that I'm very excited, and I think that it's now possible, and I really want to encourage more people in this room that building to explore this idea, is this idea of programmatically linking a DAO's profits to the success of its dependents. That could be software projects, that could be other public goods, that could be communities. It could be anything, but we now have the opportunity in this transparent ledger to have entities that they don't promise that, oh, I'm going to be a good citizen, and like I care about open source and I'm going to do good things with open source, but they can actually codify that. Every time that money comes in, X percentage can be going to the open source dependencies they have. Y percentage can be going to, like some other public goods that they really care about. And luckily, this isn't just a wild vision that I'm hoping for. If you look around you in crypto, there are already teams that are actually showcasing that this is the way. The best example of that, I think, is Optimism, the Optimist Collective and retroactive public goods funding. So what they've been doing is, of course, they're developing this layer 2 network, right? And what they've done early on is they came out and they said, you know what, actually, every time you're using this, we're making a commitment that we will be channeling some of our funds towards public goods. And they came up, with this whole concept. And I think up to the day, they have allocated, I think, more than 50 million towards public goods, right? And this is still a one-off. This isn't yet programmatic, but I know that the team is really thinking about how do we actually do this in a programmatic way. The second amazing example, we had an amazing talk by Jiki Gorilla before, shout out. So fantastic initiative. This is the Protocol Guild. For the ones of you that weren't in the room, this is a super simple, brilliant idea, which effectively a number of Ethereum maintainers decided that, you know what, it seems that the incentives don't align anymore. So what if we create a list of all the different Ethereum core contributors, and what if we start going around in DAOs and basically saying, well, you say you care about Ethereum, right? What if you actually fund the people that are developing Ethereum, right? It's a super simple idea, but I think up to the date, I think Jiki showed before, they have accumulated, I think, more than 14 million, something around $14 million, right? Which, might sound small, might sound big, but again, it shows the way. And I'm very excited, and I really think that this is a picture from the future. I really think that these new on-chain organizations where their finances, their revenue, and their expenses are all on-chain will actually start, doing this in a programmatic way. So another thing that I'm very passionate about, and I think is now possible, it's a flavor of that, but now going towards distributing ownership and decision-making power to your project's dependents, right? In the first example that I mentioned, we talked about proceeds from your protocol, but you can take the exact same idea and apply it to your own, governance token. Let's say that, if you have a DAO and, you have a governance token that represents effectively influence or power in that network, and many times as well financial upside, what if you actually start leveraging those primitives and then giving voice to the people that you depend on by allocating a portion of your native token to those different projects. And this is something that the DAO that is behind Radical and Drips, we call this RadWorks, as of last Sunday, there was a proposal that actually passed to allocate $1 million to fund effectively its critical dependencies, both with the stablecoin and with our project's native token. And we're very, very excited about this. You can see how this is working if you go into drips.network, but effectively the way we were able to do this is by creating a list. This is the DAO creating a list with RadWorks, critical software dependencies. You can see that on those lists there are 3 more lists. These are the sub-DAOs of the DAO, the Radical project, and Radical's dependencies, the Drip project, the Drip's dependencies, and the Grants project and its own dependencies. And you can see on the bottom of that screen that effectively there are two streams, right? So this $1 million is being allocated by the second over the next year using both RAD, the native token of the DAO, and USDC. And if you zoom in deeper, actually, you will be able to see, like, if you click on that list, you will be able to see Drip's dependencies. The first address is actually the protocol guild.eth. Yeah, and then additionally, you see a number of Git URLs, effectively. One of the cool things that we're doing is trying to take this idea that the protocol guild is pioneering and basically say, well, you actually don't only depend on the Ethereum core developers, but you depend on a number of open source developers out there that maybe are not yet into crypto, right? So we try to make it super simple for them to actually, stream to an open source project, and we have an interesting identity model, optional identity model, where we're using Chainlink and their own Oracle network, effectively to be able to specify an address on your main branch and then claim funds through that, and while funds are already streaming, right? So taking these ideas of what if we actually, pay it forward, and then bringing this to people outside crypto as well, not just within crypto. And again, I really think that this is something that we're going to see a lot more in the future. I think that the way I'm envisioning it, at least, is the same way that when a new DAO or a new token is launching, you have this allocation that basically says 10% team and 5% investors and whatever, like Y% liquidity mining, right? I really think that we're going to start seeing teams that basically saying, well, 5% will go to the public goods that I depend on over the next 4 years, over the next 10 years, right? And it's a commitment they make, and of course the DAO can always vote to change that list. But I really think that both for the funders, but also for the consumers, we will start requesting those things. There's no, in crypto now, there's no, oh, I care about open source, but it happens that I actually haven't funded anything. You can go on chain and see what people are doing. And if you want to be working for them, if you want to partnering with them, see what behaviors they showcase on chain. Finally, a third idea that I wanted to mention, I'm sure that this has been discussed a lot, but of course, we can go beyond that. One concrete idea for builders out there is to leverage hypersearch and try to acknowledge, the people that funding and the people receiving those funding public goods. This is an old idea. In crypto, we're talking about this type of attribution networks for a while, but I feel that, now there's good momentum for actually leveraging, again, this interconnected graph of Ethereum to build, interesting reputation mechanisms. I hope that, we're going to go beyond that every time. I've been in crypto for a while, and every year we hope for that, but hasn't happened. So hopefully it will, someone will be inspired from this token, will decide to build something interesting here. So yeah, that's all I had. If I can close with one thought, it's this one. We are all interdependent, and our success hinges upon the success of others. Please, take it and build some interesting things. Thank you.